Hello, world. Here with me today is a true innovator and creative mind when it comes to B2B marketing. Ryan Jones, founder and CEO of Refuel Creative. Founded in 2016 to provide businesses and nonprofits with end-to-end marketing and technology solutions for the modern-day workplace, Refuel and Ryan are helping organizations grow by eliminating barriers between marketing and technology. We'll find out what that means in a little bit. Based out of Australia, please welcome Ryan to the show. Ryan, are you ready to get radically transparent with me?
Very excited, Jen. Happy morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to have you, and I've got a ton of questions lined up. But the first I actually want to start with, and it's going to be an easier one, but you have a really interesting background. And I know some of the previous conversations that we've had, I'd love to exploit it to our guests, but could you give us a brief look at your professional journey and how you actually found yourself as founder and CEO at Refuel Creative today?
Yeah, I mean, my professional journey kind of started when I was 12. I was that kid that kind of took to computers really quickly and, started building websites. And all of a sudden, back then there wasn't as many people taking the internet seriously as they are these days. So all of a sudden I was building websites for family and building websites for friends and friends of friends, and all of a sudden that was my high school job, right? I was, my mates were out flipping burgers, and I was building websites and doing people's marketing for them before like I really knew what I was doing. And then just kind of went from there. I went off and did my marketing degree and spent some time in the US teaching people what to do with lobsters and all kinds of weird things like that. But
Lobsters?
Sorry?
You say lobsters?
Lobsters, yeah. So got selected to do an international marketing project for the Australian rock lobster fishers that wanted to get their lobsters into the US market. So we traveled the States and went to see Gordon Ramsay's kitchens and Jamie Oliver's kitchens and all these kind of back entrance to the chef and say good day, and here's an Australian lobster and here's what you do with it and how can we get you to buy lobsters. It was the best form of market research that you could imagine because it was in their hands and they were so ecstatic about it that they couldn't not give you time. It was an amazing experience and really my first overseas trip, as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old going over to the States and carrying lobsters on my shoulder around New York City is not something you forget in a hurry.
So I grew up in New Jersey, and I every weekend was in New York, and I'm just the image in my head right now of you carrying lobsters. I mean, that's pretty grand. And to see where you are today, right, from lobsters to marketing mastermind, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, now we do toilets instead of lobsters.
There you go. So listen, I want to ask because a lot of people listening in, I mean, the audience is global, which is, I think, incredible. But Refuel Creative, in one sentence, which can be the challenge, what do you help your clients do?
So we use technology to help our clients target their right fit customer, eliminate bottlenecks to growth, and really grow their businesses from there.
Okay. And so from the kid at 12, yeah, that's right. From the kid at 12 who was doing this since he was 12 years old. I mean, that's a pretty impressive CV or resume, wherever you're listening in from. But what I would imagine from that, right? It sounds so much easier said than done, I'm sure. Organizations and people leading organizations, they're really smart people. But when it comes to technology, right, we all know we need it, but there's a lot of gaps in between humans, technology, marketing, technology. So I can only imagine that there's a ton keeping you up at night professionally. I'm sure also non-professionally there's a lot these days. But could you let us into a little bit of before you head to bed, what's in your mind? What's keeping you up?
It's so hard to stay on top of the changes that are coming, and any day you can go to bed with the internet existing in one way, and it changes completely by the time you get up. Especially being in Australia, where basically an entire American workday happens while I'm asleep, and I missed out on the opportunity to get GameStop shares, and all of those kind of things happen while we're asleep. And old mate Mark Zuckerberg occasionally decides to throw a grenade at us, and so you can be doing the best job that you possibly can. You can be doing everything right, and then you can wake up one morning and your day is ruined before you even start. So we're really privileged to be in a position where we get the opportunity to grow our clients' businesses. We get the opportunity to, in a lot of cases, we're their entire marketing spend. And there's a lot of responsibility that comes along with that. So we have to be the ones that stay on top of that constantly, and making sure that you're doing the right thing by them and avoiding those kind of pitfalls is definitely keeps me up at night.
I can imagine. And I think what's interesting there is that, right, so what's keeping you up, it's kind of all like, right, so when we're working with social networks, shout out to Mark Zuckerberg. I know exactly what you're speaking about. We're going to get into it in a moment. But when we're working with the social networks, even here at Oktopost, right, it's, you don't have control over what they're about to do with their APIs. And in the Australian case, right, and just for the audience listening in, so I want to take a moment and talk about this because I think, I've read about it in the news. We actually put it out on our advocacy board when this happened for employees to share because our jaws were just dropped to the floor. But in Australia, right, I think this was back in February, keep me honest, that, and I think in Mark Zuckerberg's defense and Twitter and all the social networks are trying to do the best they can to help with fake news, right? This actually kind of backfired in their face, I'd say, and really gave us a curveball, right? But Facebook actually blocked news to Australians on its platform, right? And if I understand correctly, it was because of a dispute over a proposed law, right, which would force Facebook and Google to pay news publishers for content. And what's interesting about that, right? So like the news dropped. And so I sit in Tel Aviv, originally from New Jersey. We have global clients. We're taking a look at what's going on. And then you and I meet, and all that's going through my head is, how on earth did that impact you? And how the heck did you navigate that with your clients? Because you guys are supposed to be the experts on how to navigate these strange crisis moments. And again, keep me honest today, you can, as you tell your story, but has Facebook since refriended Australia, or are you guys still out of the game?
Look, no, Facebook has refriended the Australian government. The Australian government has basically given into a lot of Facebook's demands. The proposed law was all about getting Google and Facebook to pay for news content. But unfortunately, in the fine print in the proposed law, they didn't properly define what news content was. So we knew that Facebook had said, oh, look, if this doesn't change and this passes the Senate, then our Australian government makes it law, then we won't be able to put news on Facebook anymore. And okay, fair enough. That's your position. It's a business decision that you've got to make. But, realistically, none of us actually expected that to happen. So it was a Thursday morning. I have an early morning US call, and I'm on this US call, and I'm like, oh, Facebook's a bit different today. And Facebook's got a banner up to say that they've blocked news sites, which for us, we have one client who's a news site. We've got some risk mitigation strategies for them. We didn't think it would be a big deal. No worries. And then one by one, our page got taken down. Some of our clients' pages got taken down. Anyone who really had a good content strategy and they were posting their own blogs on their page, all of a sudden their entire timeline on their company page was blank. And this happened so fast that we thought, well, all right, let's not stress out about this. We're not a news source. Let's go and ask Facebook support. They didn't know that it had happened. They're like, oh, let me look into this. Oh no, there's no reason why your timeline should be wiped out. I'm like, okay, cool. But it is, right? And it ended up that because the government had so badly defined what constituted news, that Facebook had just gone, look, anyone who's putting out enough of this content is a news source and we're going to remove them.
Wow.
And it even got to a point where, let's say, 7 a.m. in the morning, I'm doing a post on our Facebook page about the fact that Facebook looks a bit different today and not to worry about it. That got posted, and by 7:30, it had had 10 impressions and been taken down. This rollout happened consistently over the course of the morning, and by I think it was the next day, the Australian government had obviously publicly admonished Facebook and told them to pull their head in. Facebook had said their piece, and everyone kind of met in the middle, and news started coming back to Facebook. Some people I know have said that it was the most peaceful Facebook has been forever. 24 hours without news. You know, you ask me what keeps me up at night, a lot less kept me up that night because I didn't know about it, right? So it was interesting that just over the course of this one day, there was a big short-term bang. After a little while, after probably like 11 o'clock in the morning, people are kind of settled in and gone, okay, this is going to resolve itself. There's nothing we can do about it short term. So today is just a day where your social media managers are going to do quite a lot of not much. And we'll stress about it again tomorrow when things have resolved. And by the afternoon, it looked pretty clear that it was going to resolve pretty soon. So other than adding a bit of weight on us in the morning, it actually ended up being not too bad, but definitely the way that, I mean, Facebook will of course deny this forever, but the way that Facebook have prioritized news in our Australian news feeds has changed as well. The kind of news, even now, there are news outlets which don't appear in our feeds quite so much. They've been deprioritized.
Interesting.
Which isn't that bad, really, when you consider who you really want to connect with on Facebook. But it's a whole different world.
Totally. And, as you're telling this story, I think, as someone who also, works with customers and clients, what on earth was going through your head when you knew you would probably have to pick up the phone and kind of explain, not necessarily unexplainable, but how did you even navigate that conversation with some of your clients who already, right, we know B2B companies, and for many, social media is not exactly seen as an ROI driver to begin with, and it takes a lot of kind of, no, social is important, social is important. How did you navigate those conversations, and did you have to have any of those?
We got on the front foot with a couple of people who were affected really early on. So the news outlet, for example, we sent them an email, we explained the situation, we explained the risk mitigation that we'd already put in place, and that wasn't a major issue.
Okay.
With the others, because it was a rollout type process, they just started ringing as their page was empty. So we couldn't stay on top of it fast enough to get ahead and warn them in advance. So they kind of appreciated the complexity of the situation, and we worked together on that. But some of them, some B2B marketers aren't on their page frequently enough to even notice that they were affected. We were, in some cases, reporting it to them before they knew that they were seeing it themselves.
Oh wow. Well, that's good because that that places you in a a leadership kind of role, knowing what's going on, knowing the buzz, and that actually leads me into my next question, which when it comes to social, and I know your forte is marketing and technology and bridging it together and bringing it together, and I'm curious to know, after the year that was 2020, then we have Facebook defriending Australia, and then we have where we are today as a bunch of B2B marketers. Where and what are you seeing B2B marketers doing well right now? And kind of in the opposite of that direction, what do you think that they can do better right now?
I think the good B2B marketers are being more relatable and authentic again. The ones that people realize that there's a human on the other end of that Facebook page or that LinkedIn post or whatever it is, and that I'm seeing a lot more authenticity there. And I think people are resonating more with businesses and the humans behind those businesses. I think the B2B marketers that aren't, that potentially could improve there, they're the ones that are still that old institutional mentality where, we are a business, the tone of voice for the business is this business, and we are, there's no humans here. We are one big, strong thing. People want to see the gens of the world behind the microphone talking about marketing and talking about what they're doing. And when we've spoken to, we are a B2B business, and when we speak to our customers, the thing that they like about working with us is the humans that they deal with. It's not the brand, it's not the logo, it's not anything else. They can get results from a few different agencies, but they want people that they enjoy working with, and that needs to come across in your communications, whether that's on social or your marketing material or whatever it is.
Absolutely. What I think is really ironic in this whole kind of changed new world after the pandemic, or some of us were still in it, is kind of how, right? So all of us suddenly were sent home. We're working from home. I think companies now are battling with, like, do we come back to hybrid models? Do we have mandatory days in office, mandatory days out of office? Does everybody come back to the office? And everybody's trying to find now kind of the new normal in office life or home life or whatever it may be. And ironically, while everybody was sent home, brands, use that and were pivoting to become more authentic, more human. Well, no humans were actually able to communicate. I think that is so wild. But I'm curious to know, in Australia, and specifically at Refuel Creative, right? So how did the pandemic impact your team in terms of work life, working in the office? Were you remote before? What did that look like? And then, in your opinion, has remote work hindered or helped your business?
So I started the business on my own and then added team members over time. So we were set up from the outset for remote work because I might have had to travel to a client, or I might have brought on some contractors initially. So we had quite good remote work policy set up. But if you can believe this, we got to a point where we were getting turned down when when we were sending out job offers because they didn't want to work remote, which seems crazy right now, right? But I had 2 or 3 applicants just go, "Oh, look, I'd love to work there, but the remote work doesn't suit me." Okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
So we opened an office and we set everything up in the office. And then when the pandemic hit, because we offered work from home, we had work from home policies, it was quite easy for everybody to just pack everything up and move from home. And now we have remote full-time staff as well as people in the office. But it was just, we were geared up for it. But what I noticed is not every human is geared up for it. And that full-time remote work from home doesn't suit everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so we reached a point where it was clear that a couple of people weren't coping as well being home on their own. We opened the office as soon as it was safe and practical to do it. But we had some optional sort of phasing period. And now it's allowed us to do things like, if somebody needs to have a COVID test, they can work from home for let's say it's a day or two to get the test results. Somebody has a cold or a flu, again, they can stay at home, they can keep working from home if they're well enough to do so. And they've got that flexibility, and they know that they don't have to stress about sick days and leave requirements and things like that. So it's worked out really well for us from being able to retain talent in because they can work from anywhere. But it's also meant that we can be quite flexible and really just treat our team like the adults that they are.
Absolutely. And in terms of the team, with everybody working from home and kind of having this more flexible hybrid work policy, have you hired outside of Australia at all?
Not yet, not
That on the
yet.
roadmap?
We potentially, I mean, we're growing in the US at the moment, and we'd love to add team members in each country where we have customers. But the time zones are kind of putting us off doing that at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that time's far away. I think we will, over the next year, we'll start to hire people in different countries. And it's really, this has been available to us for a long time, but it's normalized that in the minds of, most importantly, our customers, where they're a bit more accepting now. If we've got people in Tel Aviv, we've got people in Toowoomba, we've got people in the US. They understand now that it's a very different environment than it used to be. So that's just going to continue to be a factor here.
I think that's actually one of my favorite lemonades, if you will, of such a lemon situation, is how I think the world really did become a smaller place, but better at accepting time zones. And, you know, even though many businesses have had and have now global teams, I think there is a more human aspect of, okay, if you're sitting in this time zone or you're sitting in that country, we can still work together. We can still do a lot of really creative things. We don't always have to be in the same place at the same time. And I think that the pandemic has actually proven that that business model or that way of working works well. And I think that might be one of my favorite lemonades. The one thing
But we talk about the authenticity, and you've got how many people's kitchens have you seen this year?
I know.
How many dogs have you met? Like, how cool is it to get a look at, you're not a number, you're not a marketer, you're a human being, and I get to have a look at your life and kind of, it's nice. So I think we've built relationships with people over the last 12 or 18 months that they're more human connections as a result.
Totally. I've actually, the best story that I've got from that. So I have a son at home, and it was one of those days you're like rushing to make dinner. I had a call with a CEO right after dinner, so ate really fast, gave child to husband, and I ate really like quickly. I was eating some spinach mushroom dish. You can imagine where this is going. And I'm sitting down, and I hadn't looked in the mirror all day. I was like working from home, and I sat down to have this meeting, and I had like crazy hair going every which way. I had a little spinach in my teeth, and it was like the most embarrassing yet relatable moment because that specific CEO had also had a trying day. He had a newborn at home. So we both, I think that was the first time we were like looking at ourselves on Zoom. And it just caused a great laugh. And from that day, we've had a great connection going forward. But to that point, I couldn't agree more, right? Like you see people, you can see behind me, I'm sitting in my office we just moved into, and you just get to know that person on such a new level, not just LinkedIn or not just in the office. So I do agree with that. A question though for you, and when it comes, you do lead people and manage people, and I think that's one of the toughest jobs. And I wanted to ask, as a CEO and as somebody leading people, right? I do think what is hard over Zoom is to get a pulse check on how your team is doing, not in person, right? There's all these benefits of working from home, but I do think in this aspect, this is not one of them. How are you able to keep your team motivated, keeping them happy? What kind of, I guess, initiatives or perks have you maybe had to put in place, or types of meetings do you have to ask some difficult questions that are happening on Zoom? Because once someone presses that goodbye button on Zoom, you don't really know how their day may be going.
We do some private calls off of Zoom. So some of the calls were just on Slack,
Mm-hmm.
video calls so that you can see the response. But I encourage people to ring my mobile if there are any issues. And definitely I had a couple of phone calls last year where staff were just in tears because the isolation of working from home for an extended period just like it's caused a lot of sort of mental anguish for people in different ways. And so it's the first thing we tried to do is communicate clearly and early. So as soon as we knew that this was an issue, we clearly articulated what our response plan would be. We clearly articulated what our team needed to do, and we also made it clear that most of our work is online. Most of our customers are not in the state. There's no need for us to have face-to-face contact. So we didn't see jobs at risk, whereas I know that other people have had to do layoffs. So we tried to make sure everybody understood that things will go on. And so that allowed them to worry about what they really needed to worry about without work being an extra problem there. Um, we also tried to make sure that we would do some more casual things between our Slack and our Zoom calls and things like that. We tried to make sure we had face-to-face meetings. Everybody liked their different Zoom virtual background and their different bit of personality there. And there's some great stuff on our blog showing people wearing tutus to team meetings and like just ridiculous stuff like that, just to make people laugh. But and then as soon as we could, we tried to bring in some more of that human interaction. But some of those habits have continued for us. So now that we've got remote staff, we'll jump on Zoom on a Friday for lunch, and we'll have a team lunch together, and everybody orders from Uber, and it all turns up, and we all eat lunch on Zoom.
Hope it's not spinach and mushrooms.
It's definitely not spinach and mushrooms. But there's ways that we can engage with people that they're not necessarily online. We also used a HR system called 15.5.
Okay.
I'm
What's
sure
15
that a few of your listeners are familiar with it, but one of the things it does is a weekly check-in,
Okay.
and it captures the pulse of how that person's feeling as well.
Interesting.
So if they identify that they're struggling, 15.5 actually sends you an alert and says, this person's struggling, this is what we've identified over time, and this is what you should do to
Wow.
address this. So we really tried to be proactive and supportive through that process. And I think in general that's worked quite well, and that's enabled us to grow off the back of the experience.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to take a look at 15.5. That sounds pretty awesome. Uh, technology. There you go. So listen, our time is winding down. It's been a fantastic conversation. I would love to keep going, but sake of the episode. So I want to ask. I'll call them a question and a half more. So the full question I want to ask, and it's my favorite question on the show. But can you share with us one thing about yourself that we cannot find on your LinkedIn profile, or if we do a Google search?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to say I'm a bit of a barbecue enthusiast.
Oh man, our
So
CEO
I
loves barbecue.
get my smoker out, and with my friend, we make our own small goods and our own bacon and salami and things. And it's just a good kind of analog job for the weekends. Whereas you're digital all week, you can do something with your hands on a weekend and get away from a computer.
Amazing. Do you have a food Instagram or any sort of page?
No special food Instagram at this point. You can follow me on my Instagram and see my various barbecue exploits. They're definitely not on my LinkedIn profile, but it's good to food brings people together, and getting the opportunity to share that kind of thing with friends and family is really rewarding.
I couldn't agree more. Listen, at Oktopost, we're huge barbecue fans as well. Our CEO a huge fan. Whenever I would travel with him, we would have no joke barbecue. He would, research the best barbecue places wherever we would be traveling to for work. And we would have, no joke, I kid you not, breakfast, lunch, and dinner at a barbecue place. So I actually, through our CEO, got to know a bit about barbecue. So we will have to invite you down over to Tel Aviv to have some good old-fashioned Israeli barbecue. And in return, we hope you can invite us for some Australian barbecue.
That's amazing. But, those barbecue places don't serve spinach and mushroom, do they?
They do not. I think the closest thing I got to a vegetable at those places were fried pickles. And yeah, fried pickles are pretty tasty. It was in Atlanta. That was one place. And then we went once to a Korean barbecue. I'm telling we've got it.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to do an episode about barbecue. Apologies to all the vegans listening, but it's seriously, I mean, it's a culture of its own. Keep me honest. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good, even I'm a big Foo Fighters fan, and even Dave Grohl's got a barbecue and goes out and cooks briskets and pork ribs for all of his friends, and it's such a good thing to do. Not very often, you've obviously got to eat your spinach and mushrooms during the weeks and have your barbecue on the weekend.
What's your favorite meat to barbecue?
Ooh, brisket. I'm going to go with brisket.
Brisket. All right. So we're all coming over for brisket, number one. And number two, if anybody wants to speak more barbecue with you, or more specifically marketing and technology with you, where's the best place to connect?
Connect on LinkedIn, where you won't find any reference to barbecue. Ryan Jones on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find me pretty easily. And yeah, hit me up with your best brisket recipe, and I'd love to chat beef.
Amazing, Ryan
or
Jones.
B2B marketing, I guess.
That sounds like a plan. So Ryan Jones, find him on LinkedIn. Feel free to talk barbecue, talk beef, and of course, marketing and technology. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thanks, Jen. Have a good day.
Thanks for tuning in to the Radically Transparent podcast, brought to you by Oktopost, the only social media management and employee advocacy platform architected for B2B. I'm Jennifer Gutman, your host and director of social strategy here at Oktopost. And if you love today's show, we'd love if you subscribe, rate, and give a raving review wherever you get your podcasts. For more discussion on B2B social media marketing, be sure to follow Oktopost on LinkedIn. And of course, to gain access to all our free social media marketing and employee advocacy resources, head on over to our website, www.oktopost.com. Until next time.